That we do something that's both substantive and interesting and mechudish, something that's novel. So I thought to share minyanim pertaining to Zmanei Halacha that not many people have a very strong yad in it, and it's available in the Siddur, so it means everybody's supposed to be aware of it. So I brought this Siddurim over here. And we try to make some clarity in things that are very unclear. A little bit clarity. Take a sit over here. I'll take a look at the Alter Rebbe in the Seder Chanas Shabbos. Before that, I want to tell you 2 points. First of all, we have a Hayim Yoim. I believe it is Hayim Yoim. Sunday, 2 weeks ago. I don't know exactly. But the Imam says over there an interesting anecdote about Alter Rebbe. But it says that the Alter Rebbe, at a young age, became a baki in geometry and in astronomy. Yeah. And it came out that he actually made a calendar. For 15 years he made a calendar, Kiddush Chodesh. And he also ended up speaking about Kiddush Chodesh and Lemotzu Hakochavim Yideim V'Ragleim Beis HaMedrash. So, here it is, Zayin Shvat. Now that he was 9 years old, he learned about geometry and astronomy. When he was 10, he arranged the Luach for 15 years. When he was 12...
Who taught the Alter Rebbe this stuff? Who taught the Alter Rebbe this?
Good question. It's an old joke. They say, who in the first Chumash Rashi, right?
Google. No. I'm saying...
You know the first Chumash Rashi?
I
They say Rashi's father. It's only Chumash Rashi, huh?
And would actually expect Alter Rebbe to learn these types of studies, but who was the one to teach such stuff to Alter Rebbe?
Okay, so speculate in a second.
Was Alter Rebbe a non-Jewish teacher, or was there a Jewish teacher that was well informed? What?
So when he's 12 years old, listen for a second. So he learned. It ended up basically. It doesn't seem like he prepared this year, but it ended up that he taught Kiddush Chodesh from the Rambam in front of some great Goinim, and those Goinim, by that experience, they couldn't find Yideim V'Ragleim Beis HaMedrash. Which means that he totally astounded them, going way beyond anything they understood. So what does it tell me? This Yom tells me is multiple things. First of all, the Alter Rebbe had a unique chush in mathematics and astronomy, pertaining to astronomy particularly. The second point is that many of the Goinim of that time didn't have that chush. So even though they were Goinim, they were very excelling. They were very experienced in many inyanim of Torah, but that Inyan didn't have. So the question is, wants to know where the Alter Rebbe learned from. So Pashtus, any person who wants to know these things, if he has a chushim, there are many svarim. You don't have to go to Siddur from Kseinim. There are many svarim written on these subjects, including the Kiddush Chodesh Rambam. There's even svarim, sure. The svarim of Euclidus, the svarim of Euclid, all these svarim of geometry. They're written originally in the Greek and the Arabic, and many of them translated in Halachic Kodesh already for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. There's these svarim written in geometry and all these things. So it's not.
Where's from?
Come. Yeah. Even the Gra and the Talmidim brought svarim on geometry as well. It's fun. I mean, so what it tells me is, and something that the Rebbe would often say about certain things that are obscure in Yonam Halacha, like Yonam of Shaykh to Pikuach Nefesh, Yonam Shaykh to military strategy, is that you have to recognize those that are experts on this thing, you defer to them implicitly. Not because they're your Rav, but implicitly, they're the expert on this issue. So, when it comes to Zmanim, so there's a big problem. The problem is that Chazal have many mentions of various Zmanim, and all of them are describing certain physical phenomena. You know, the sun is over here, the sun is over there. You go to the mikveh on Reish Kamel, and you go down to, and you go out of the mikveh, and the sun is down the bottom. an Ezach and Hitz Vatachtin, Hitz Rebellion, different descriptions. And all those descriptions don't necessarily add up to each other. And therefore, you have Rishonim and Achreim trying to make heads and tails out of it. And you have two types. You have those that are looking within halacha just to make heads and tails. And then you have, like the Alter Rebbe, and the Grot to some extent, and some others, you see clearly they understood the whole picture, not just the Chazals, they understood it within the economical context that it was relating to. And based on this, they came with an authoritative opinion. So you go to shul, any fast day, somebody's even not a fast day, and people say, 72, 64, you can't make that matter. By and large, they know what they're talking about. Right? They're just throwing out numbers and things they heard from this one, maybe Zalman maybe that. The Alter Rebbe actually has a very clear gang on these things. And therefore, we would be remiss if Tziduk Chabad wouldn't really understand at least the basis of what the Alter Rebbe is saying and why we hold this way and why we don't really have to be machmer and mekel according to the shittas because there's a klar gang in this Inyan. Mashenk and other Devi Yisrael, I'm saying their greatness, but there's a lot of being machmer and mekel based on different things because there's not clarity on the issue. Okay, so to get that's one thing I wanted to mention. Second thing is the Alter Rebbe tells like this. In the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, so we have 4 simanim. In the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, we have 4 simanim that the Alter Rebbe wrote a Madura Basra of. What's the Madura Basra? We don't know. Speculation that is written already by the greats, not my speculation, that either the Alter Rebbe wanted to write in Durbas and the Hoshan Lach, and he didn't write it, or maybe he did write it, they don't have it. But one thing is clear, is the Alter Rebbe took a different tack in the Durbas, and he wasn't as semich like the Bnei Mechaber that the Alter was chosen to write on the Magen Avraham, but rather he took a more authoritative approach and passed it more either based on Kabbalim or Bechal redeveloped the halacha organically. So one of the things he writes over here, in Shulchan Aruch, right at the beginning in Dura Basra, over here it is. In the Siman Aleph, in Halacha Ches, so the Alter Rebbe is talking about getting up by Tzeis. Mida Beinoni, everybody gets up by Tzeis. Right? There's Mida Beinoni. He says, but what's Tzeis? What is Tzeis? So he says Tzeis is always 12 hours after the previous Tzeis. Doesn't make a difference how big day is, how small day is. The center is always Mida Center. So it'll be 12 hours after the previous Tzeis. So that's the easy way of being able to figure out when it is. But then he deals, being that the Alter Rebbe is like developing halach in a more organic manner, he's explaining to you things that just doesn't make sense. Saying, but what does that mean? There's an Eis Ratzon L'mayla by Tzeis. The Eibishter is not Gligvul, right? And we're talking about Tzeis is a very specific time. It's a Chvul. To say there's an Eis Ratzon only this moment, the Eibishter cares this moment, that moment. What's the difference? What's the whole chap? So that's the Alter Rebbe says it is. Even though the days and the nights they change, and every place is a different place, so there's always Tzeis somewhere. Right? So he says, nevertheless, we have to understand that this is relevant to the idea of Kriyishma, Tefillah, Kedusha Shabbos, Yom Tif. All these things are Lamal Megillah Zman HaMokim. When we talk about the holiness of Shabbos, we talk about Eis Ratzon L'mayla, when it's supposed to eat matzah on Pesach. These are not times that are related to any specific time in this world. It's talking about Lamal Zman, which is an Indian that's Gligvul, which really doesn't have a Shachsa time. But nevertheless, the Eibishter, they wanted us in this world to be able to experience it. He placed us within the realm of Zman HaMokim, and he told us that in this specific time, in this specific place, that's where it's coming down. And the Alter Rebbe actually expands the idea even more. No thanks. He expands the idea even more, and he's mechadash shita over here about Yom Shin Shagoyis, which is a big machlekes in the Rabban and Bechal, even in Chabad, about how to understand it. That Alter Rebbe explains that basically wherever you are on the globe at that moment, that's where your mamshich, this bligvul inyan, into your gvul. So really it has nothing to do with Daiti Lachsa, not Daiti Lachsa, where you live, where your family is, according to this understanding of Mudar Basra. It really has to do only with where you are in that specific moment. That's where your mamshach, your bligvul into gvul. So inherently, the idea of Zmanim is that it's a big Gvul Indian, but nevertheless we have to relate to Gvul, which makes the idea of Zmanim even more, not just more understood, but even more relevant. Because essentially it's really connected to the whole idea of Dirib Tatanim. That the Eibusher wants, we should take something that's big Gvul, and we should somehow connect it to Gvul, the Gvul Atzmi, which is the idea that he created this world, and he said, okay, this 24 hours in this specific place is going to be Shabbos. Therefore, Zman Krishma and Matfilah, all these things somehow become relevant. Not because we're stuck in this matzah, because the Eibusher wants us to be stuck in this matzah. Okay. Which brings us to the Alter Rebbe over here in the Siddur. So before, yeah.
The dress is twice a day, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But why does the morning have to be by a certain time?
Because Zman Kima and Zman Shchiva. Why does not have to be a certain time?
Why?
Why does not have to be a certain time? Same thing. Zman Shchiva and Zman Kiva. So Zman Kima is from Alois Shachar until Sholish Shois. The Gemara says really Zman Kima is really everybody's getting up in the morning, but there's Bnei Malachim that get up late. So as long as there's mute people that are coming, it's also good. And Shchiva is the same thing. Most people go to sleep at night, but as long as and that's why.
Is that also relative to the town?
No. Okay. So this is the big discussion in general with regards to understanding Zmanim is like this. You have the Gemara in B'Memelikin. The Gemara in B'Memelikin, Daf Lamed Daled, talks about the various indications of when is Mishtishka Chama, when does the sun go down. And the Gemara gives a bunch of different descriptions. Hichsev Tachten, Hichsev Elyon, Chamberish Carmel, like I mentioned before, various descriptions. But one of the most significant descriptions is a description that we know how to relate it to time. Because it might be a cloudy day, and we don't know what Rish Carmel is, and we don't know no colors. So, with regard to time, that's something that every person could count, hopefully. So, the Gemara says machlokes about how much time, but it seems the psak of Gemara is that from the time of Misha Tishka Chama, from the time that the sun goes down, until Tzeis Hakochavim, until the time that we consider night, that would be Shloisha Rivi Mil. 3/4 of a mil. So 3/4 of a mil, if we could figure out how long that takes, so we could also ostensibly figure out how long it takes for it to become night. Okay. Seems simple enough. Now, how do we know how long a mil is? So we have a Gemara Pesachim. Gemara Pesachim, that's Tzad Daud. So the Gemara Pesachim is not really talking about Zmanim per se. It's really talking about distances, but it relates the distances to the time. It's a conversion table, so to speak. Right? You have to convert this distance to how much time it takes. Why is the Gemara talking about it? It's talking about what's the distance with regards to taking Kram Pesach. Person who's distant from the Askupas Hazara at a certain point on Erev Pesach, so he's part of bringing Kram Pesach. So it discusses the distance. So it figures out a cheshbon, right? It says how long does a person walk a whole day? Without going into too much details. So it says basically 40 mil he walks about the whole day. Yeah? How long is the day? That was 12 hours, huh?
What's the distance of a mil?
A mil is approximately around the kilometer.
Around a kilometer.
Approximately. About 0.6 of a mile.
40 mils, 25 miles.
Huh?
So 40 mils, 25 miles.
Better.
12 hours, that's a very slow pace.
So you have a situation where the Gemara tells you that it takes a person a full day to walk 40 mil. That's an average person. Then the Gemara discusses what are we talking about? What's the day? So it says 4 mil or 5 mil. It's a discussion. We're not going into details. That is mikam milchashki, means that people are getting up earlier and they're going to sleep later, which means really it's only 30 or 32 mil that is an actual day, right? It's the first 4 or 5 mil, and the last 4 or 5 mil is really people getting up earlier. They start working before it gets light, and they finish walking after it starts getting dark, which is essentially the idea of we call Aleitha Shachar until Netzach Chama and Shkia until Tzeis Hakochavim. Is that the day, and the day really is in one hand is the whole day from daybreak, from the moment that the sun starts to come up.
Numbers are not adding up. Cubes there.
Okay, we'll get the numbers there. We didn't get complicated yet. We'll get complicated soon.
Google Maps.
Huh?
You're telling me that in a 12-hour period,
Yeah.
the first hour and the last hour you're doing 8 miles, but the 10 middle hours you're doing 32 miles.
Well, you don't know how long is the first and last. That's what we're getting to. I say 4 or 5 mil. That may be an hour and a half. You don't know how long that is.
It's about an
According
hour.
to Ben, how you know? According to Ben Tam,
46
he
minutes
says
for Shtiebel, this is covered.
maybe it's 72, maybe 96 minutes, maybe 120 minutes according to Ibn Chaim. We don't know.
Okay, fine.
You're jumping the gun.
You got me here at our time.
But this is the big issue over here. So the Gemara is saying that you have throughout the day proper 30 or 32 mil. Yeah. The morning and the evening from Alois till Nates and from Shkia to Hakochavim, you're gonna have 4 or 5 mil. Yeah. So if you divide the whole day, you look at the entirety of it, which that's the way Rabbi most Rishonim and Achronim seem to learn. You look at the whole day, divide the whole day as 12 hours. So you'll end up with each meal being 18 minutes. The numbers work out. Yeah? Each meal will be 18 minutes. 40, 12. Okay. But if you divide...
It's a lot slower than Google Maps. A lot slower than Google Maps.
What do Google Maps do?
Google Maps
What's their rate?
20 minutes a mile.
20 minutes a mile. But
Said a mil, not a
A
mile.
Mil
is
is
million
less.
kilometers.
Mil is like 0.6 better.
So it should really be about 12 minutes a meal, not 18 minutes.
If it's talking about throughout the day, it's having enough.
If you're walking enough mil throughout the day, you have to walk at a lower rate, I assume.
Yeah, you can't. You're not going to be walking every single one.
Google Maps is assuming a person's walking a half a mile. But if you're walking every day, you're trying to get somewhere, you have to even it out. So I assume how much you cover in a day. To a person walking till about how much you cover in a day. This is the day. Every day you're doing that. You have to balance it out. It's a drink. You have to rest. Something about the actual walking. That's what I assume.
How does it tell us the time of the day?
Huh?
How does it tell us the time of the day?
We'll get there. So what does this take us? So this is how the majority of the poskim that we have up until the Alter Rebbe's time, not necessarily the majority later on, but they say that a meal is 18 minutes. Therefore, 3/4 of a meal that the Gemara says is the amount of time that it takes from Shkia Sechama until Tzeis Hakochavim is 13.5 minutes. Simple cheshbon, right? Okay, good.
15 and a half, it's a lot more realistic. It's a lot more realistic.
3/4 of a meal. Okay. Now, there are other poskim that learn the Rambam, not Stam, very, very significant poskim, coming from the Goynim, that they say that you have to calculate a day from Netzach Chama till Shkia Chama. So you take the remainder 30 or 32 and you divide that into 12. You end up with a much bigger meal. You end up with a meal of 24 minutes, or for 32 mil, you end up with 22.5 minutes, I think it says. So we're not necessarily negating that the day starts from Leitzer Shachar for many mitzvahs, but we're saying with regards to calculating how long the milim are, and with regards to what we consider to be the day practically, it's a 24-minute meal from Nates till Shkia, and therefore when the Gemara says 3/4 of a meal is the time from Shkia to Tzeis Hakochavim, that would be 18 minutes. Yeah, 3/4 of 24 is 18 minutes according to Alter Rebbe. Okay. Now that we understand this background, so there's a Tzeis over there himself. Tzeis over here, Tzeis over there. Question of the day, answer the Beinoni Tam. What does the Beinoni Tam say? He says this doesn't work out. Because if you're telling me that there's 4 million in the morning and there's 4 million in the evening, yeah. So it's muzayin that the time from Shkia Sachama until Tzeis Hakochavim is not 18 minutes or 13.5 minutes, but rather the time is for sure not less than 72 minutes. 18 times 4, right? Maybe more, maybe 96 minutes. But not less than that. So what's pshat? That you have these Gemaras seem to be a loggerhead, seem to be a clear contradiction to these two Gemaras. So what does the Ben Tam answer? He answers a very important answer. And this is how many of the Rishonim learn, and including the Mechaber, the Ramah, the Avram, and so on and so forth. They say Shtei Shkiyas. Simple answer. Seems simple at least. There's two Shkiyas. What does two Shkiyas mean? Two Shkiyas means that when the sun goes down, that's a practical Shkiyah as a frame of reference. It has no real halachic bearing. It's just what we call the sun went down. So Shtei Shkiyas, that's the first time, that's when you start counting from. You miss the sun goes down. Okay, so it's the end of the day from what we consider to be day, light time. And now is the time of counting till when you get to the second shkia, when it actually ends up being the halachic shkia. And then 3/4 of the milk from that, 13.5 minutes later, you're going to have Tzeis Hakochavim. So basically, according to Beinoni Tam, and that is the opinion of the majority of the Rishonim Achronim, it seems, that when we call shkia sunset, whatever, astronomical sunset, nautical sunset, whatever it is, you look on the New York Times, it'll tell you what the sunset is, but without going details, there's maybe a minute, 2, 3, or 4 difference between the various sunsets, but general sunset is when the sun goes down below the horizon, yeah? So you have another hour or so, 58.5 minutes, right, of 3.25 mil, that's just starting from that first shkia till the first quarter of, then the first quarter of the third mil. And then you have the last 3/4 of the mil, last 13.5 minutes, yeah, till 72 minutes, and then you have your shkia, you have the Tzeis Hakochavim. So that is the opinion of the Mechaber, and the Ramah, and all these opinions, and that's the way you're going to see many Hungarian Kehilas, Firzach, and some Polisher also, is they call it Beinoni Tam's shkia. Even though that's really the shkia according to the majority. That's what I wanted to get to about Daven Mincha late. But they're right, according to their shita, is that according to the shita, until an hour after our shkia, 58.5 minutes, you can chil Daven Mincha. Because it's just a matter of frame of reference. There's no halachic bearing on that time of shkia. Shkia is just the beginning of counting at 3.25 mil. Okay. The Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch and Simon Reish Samach Aleph agrees to this point. Medrash agrees. He talks about doing lighting candles, and it's very clear in Simon Reish Samach Aleph and Shulchan Aruch. The Alter Rebbe is talking about lighting candles after Shkia on Erev Shabbos, which today would be unheard of, and it's Taka Edish Eis Galten. Chmon Slam Haidaita would be a big piercing, a big isser. Whenever that's the Alter Rebbe held that way, he passed that way in the early years, and he says that. From the time the sun goes down, you have another 58.5 minutes until you have the real shkia. That's negate the shkia zachama. You could make Tzeis for Shabbos in that time. You could add to it, or you cannot add to it. But you have time until that hour, almost hour after shkia, until to still do malacha, and then you have to light candles and Mekabel Shabbos. The Alter Rebbe throughout his days, it seems, was a gradual chazara. There's a letter that. Already printed in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch when it was published. It seems the Alter Rebbe is being more machmer and saying you should light before shkia. But it's not clear the exact shita of exactly what it was a chumbra, or is it more just trying to change from his previous shita. And then in the Siddur, the Alter Rebbe published a long treatise explaining the idea of shkia according to the Go'anim, which preceded Beinoni Tam, and explaining not just that they were right, but you can't be machmir. You shouldn't be mekel. You have no reason to reckon at all with the Beinoni Tam. It's totally nidche, so to speak, not their perspective from halacha. And that's why in Chabad, totally. Alter Rebbe comes to the point. We'll say that he holds that the B'Yisrael changed his shita. So I want to learn a few lines from this Alter Rebbe, where you see the extent of the Alter Rebbe's chazara, and possibly why it also irks the Hungarians, and they can't handle it because the Alter Rebbe really strongly. Anymore, it's worthwhile to mention that even in Hungarian kilos, at least publicly, you won't find people doing malacha. Hopefully not at shkia, because they also understand that it's considered to be a big period. So nowadays, after the whole Klal Yisrael, after the Alter Rebbe and the Gura, both of them really advocated for the shita of the Goyim, and already for a few hundred years, it became that much more understood this idea based on the astronomy, based on the realities.
People before the altar were lighting Shabbos candles.
100%.
Why did Alter Rebbe take it back? Why did he make it?
So Alter Rebbe explains his whole theories of thinking.
So at what point in history did people start lighting Shabbos candles at the same time? 100 years ago? 200 years ago?
Well, you have to realize that Yiddishkeit was never monolithic because
so
people
when
were
did
far
this-
away.
when did this
So
happen?
in America, for example, when people came together, they say that the Sat Marov drove a taxi after Shkia once. Some people say what happened in Yerushalayim. Whatever it was, they tied that the local Rabbonim, whether it was the B'dati the Chiredis or it was Ramosha or others, they told him it's not going to fly over there, and he stopped. Like he realized that the Kula is not working. The Chumri Kimachmin, but the Kula, it's a major pit.
If someone has a case where they do malacha after shkia, they have no choice when something happens.
According to Alter Rebbe, there's no such a thing.
Huh?
According to Alter Rebbe, Shkia is Safik Min HaTorah, which is also Min HaTorah. The question is if you can say up to 4 minutes after Shkia, if the Alter Rebbe holds that way or not, because Alter Rebbe over here he seems to indicate that up to 4 minutes is not really Shkia yet, and that's the subject of discussion between various Chabad Rabbanim. But for sure, after 4 minutes, according to Alter Rebbe, it's Zichur Asar. No questions. But it's worthwhile to mention, even a person like Moshe, who clearly was not Hungarian in any way, he says, for example, a woman who makes a Hefsatara after Shkia, he's matter up to 9 minutes to be Mekel for Hefsatara, even though it's a very, very chomer thing, because he says it's Svek, there's so many places can pass in town, so he has a Gans Cheshbonos, and he said, according to Alter Rebbe, there's no Svek, it's very clear, and all the Gemaras all work this way, and this is, Alter Rebbe, even Roiv, considers it to be the Roiv, Rishen Merchim, and therefore there's no real leeway. Take a look over here. It's in the Siddur over here, page Reish Dalet. It's page 406 on the right side, but we'll go a little bit further into the whole sugya because we're not going to have time, obviously, to go through the details. Okay, on top of the page 407. I'm going to skip around a little bit just to get you a taste of the Alter Rebbe's thinking. On top of the page, it says, right? It's very common, this stumbling, this machshela, this obstacle by women, that they light in Shabbos Shkia. Why are they doing that? Not because they're kawidas, they're prutzos. Yeah. The reason is because it was very common. They understood the shita based on the Bren Tam and the Mechaber and Ramah and Magen Avram. That was very common. Yeah. It says Gam Anoshim Ami Oretz Kawadas Mofzacheres, and Anoshim men also and Ami Oretz Kawadas. They all no problem. It's a Bren Tam. You can do whatever you want. Yeah. So he says you have to. Now that I explained to you that it's wrong, the Alter Rebbe says. Now that I explained to you that it's not Eis Kalten according to Gemaras. Now that I explained to you that it's not Eis Kalten according to the Shonim. So you have to be media them. You have to let them know. It's not something you say. Okay, they have the shita to rely on. No, they don't really have a shita to rely on. Yeah, you have to let them know that after Shkia, it's mamish isur gomer Torah. Even though ben hashmoshes is still a suffix of Laila, but minat Torah, it's suffix deraisa is the chumrah. And you have to speak in soft words, and maybe sometimes even harsh words. Yishmalu. This is after Shkia, yeah. Maybe they're going to listen to you. It means you have to try. You have to put effort to try to coax people to stop. Yeah? But if you know for certain they're not going to listen to you, right? You're just harassing people. So then you shouldn't give musa. This is Dr. Bashida B'chal. It talks about Echasim Kapurim. Similar thing, but it has to be a little more developed. Exactly when to give musa or not to give musa. But it seems over here, Dr. Rebbe is saying is that if you have a chance, you think that maybe you're going to be able to affect them, being that it's a suffix shotera, so you have to really try. But if you're certain they're not going to be nispal from you, then obviously you don't have to try. Because then you say mutu shayge. Okay. Now, the other tells when do you have to be mocha? So he says, "V'hainu davke tekev achar shchia ad samachat isha achkach." Immediately after shkia, that we said it's already ben hashmoshes, up until the half an hour that he makes a calculation of what's considered to be ben hashmoshes until the zman of Tzeis Hakochavim. So then, if a person is going to listen, or possibly listen, you have to try to be meicha. If a person is not going to listen, so what is the point of being meicha? With Shiur Shegim. But he says, but after the zman of Tzeis Hakochavim, after the time that the Alter Rebbe holds is Tzeis Hakochavim, which means you daven Ma'ariv during the week, the time I'll say it to simplify it, the time of be'erech 6 degrees. If you have a Zman app or you have a astronomical calendar that tells you the degrees, how far it goes down, every place in the world, so be'erech 6 degrees. It's machlekes, a little bit less than 6, a little more than 6, but approximately 6 degrees. In the Chabad, according to Chabad Rabbanim, those who understand this sugya, they'll tell you that's the time the Alter Rebbe holds that it's Zichar Tzeis Hakochavim. So he says, after the time that it's Zichar Tzeis Hakochavim, you can't say, oh, but you still have a Tams. So at that point, then you have to be Meicha. Yeah? So he says, in such a case, you don't care if they're going to listen or not going to listen. You don't say, Mutter Shiur Shegim. You have to tell people. You have to tell people. Bullshit. What's the difference? You remind me of, there was a rabbi speaking in a shul. There's a rabbi speaking in a shul in the Canarsie. He was the elderly, the RCA rabbi, these old-fashioned American rabbis. So he's like, I don't understand these Charedim today. They make a whole tumult about Erev, no Erev, could he carry, not carry. He says, when I grew up in Manhattan in the 30s, he says, we all knew Hotzah Malacha Geruah, to carry a little bit, no big deal. He says, it was a Malacha Geruah. He says, everybody carry a little bit on Shabbos. Rabbi doesn't work this way. He says, it's an Isser. He's like, you're right, it was an Isser then, but you weren't so makrid in this Isser. But it gave me perspective to understand when you look at the history of Erev, which I'm very intrigued by it. I've studied a lot the history of Erev, even more than I love Erev. So historically speaking, most Erev were reactive, not proactive. Which means the reality was that in New York in the 1930s and even 1906 when the first Erev was built in Manhattan by Shua Siegel, so they were all writing that people were carrying Shabbos anyways. It wasn't that they ever felt. No one ever really believed that Erev was a good tikkun. They all believed that you're going to mezakeh people. What's called. So it was always understood by most poskim that it was always just trying to figure out how to mitigate the realities of people carrying Shabbos. Okay. But nevertheless, the Rebbe says over here, when it comes to a certain Isser, it's something that's very clear. So you can't say, "Oh, Mutter Shiur Shegim, not getting involved." Tell people. Now, I'm not talking about people that are going to be mecharef from God, people that are going to hit you, and other things, or people that they're tnikish nishbu, or they're emer mutter possibly. They're a mutter. They said this guy told them he's a car salesman. I don't know. But the point is that
wow, exactly.
You know,
Good.
yeah. The point is that if such a situation, so maybe you could say that they don't understand the issues. Okay. So what the Alter Rebbe does tell us is that you could be make on one instance. He says with regards to davening mincha, people say that if you're not holding your brain at time, how can you daven mincha after shkiyah? You go to the Sunday, you see if you daven mincha late. It happens every single week. People are starting Kabbalah Shabbos. The Alter Rebbe said like this. He says, the line starts hakodesh. Skip a few lines. Yeah. With regards to davening mincha late, he says, so what's the big deal? So you're davening sachakol a tefillah that's the zman tefillah is the rabbanon. After the zman that's a suffix yom laila, right? And there's another aspect to this issue. The Alter doesn't bring it clearly, but there's another aspect to the suffix is that there's poskim that hold that really you could daven tefillah until the next tefillah. Because the tefillah is k'teged tefillah tiknun, right? So the karbanos can be brought until the next carbon is brought technically. So even though after shki didn't bring it's already suffik yom suffik laila, but being that it's not zman of arvis yet, so as far as to say in Taka people learn pshat like this in the Mishnah. It says tefillah mincha ada erev. It doesn't say tefillah mincha ada shkia. So it could be that until you daven ma'ariv you daven mincha. So therefore, Alter Rebbe says that until vadei laila, which means the zman of 6 degrees, whatever it is, you could technically daven mincha, or at least not be moicha by those daven mincha. The Alter doesn't say you should do it because the Alter Rebbe holds really that that's already after the zman. But nevertheless, you don't think mecha does not mincha late, and therefore possibly if you can't find a minyan, so there's makim l'halkel to daven mincha late, grad the erev Shabbos. Huh?
No, it's after Tzeis.
No, that's
So you can't tell you that matter.
No, that's Yud of Ma'ariv. So the Zman of Ma'ariv. The Zman of Ma'ariv comes out at 6 degrees, right? Be'erech. 5.95, 5.88, 6.01. Very a minute to difference. So the time that you're gonna break the fast, that time that's in the time of 6 degrees Be'erech, that time is our Zman of Ma'ariv. Dav Mincha after that Zman is a Chuchatula. You can't accept Ben Tam. The Alter Rebbe says you can't accept it for anything. So Sachko you could do is you could makel in a suffix by suffix of Laila Gabi Mincha. But after the Zman of Badi Laila you can't have Mincha anymore. That's it. Okay.
Could there be a question of bracha levatala though? Suffix bracha levatala. Meaning weekday brachas, maybe Shabbos, and you're making all these. I wonder.
So with regards to Shabbos, interesting thing we mentioned about Shabbos. So Churi Makabel Shabbos by the Zman, or especially if you bench licht, and even if you didn't bench licht, but just because it became Shkia, so we said already that it's already this man and you're supposed to do Tzeis Shabbos, whatever it is. So Churi it would be a Tefillah Chol on Shabbos would be a problem.
But you know, a lot of times when you miss some davening, you could do the next davening.
You could do it as Shlum.
So how do you do my Friday night for Mincha? It's not the same.
That the Gemara says.
It's not the same.
The Gemara says it's okay. The thing is that with regards to Tfilas Chel, so obviously it's much better and it's much more reason on Erev Shabbos to be machmir to daven before Shkia because it's not respectful for Shabbos. And if a person was Mekabel Shabbos b'dibur, like he said Baruch Hu, he went to a shul that they daven my early, and he said Baruch Hu, then it says b'feish he can't daven Mincha anymore because he was Mekabel Shabbos b'dibur, and then he missed out Mincha. But if he wasn't Mekabel Shabbos b'dibur, he just waited to Shkia and it became Shabbos for him. So according to Alter Rebbe, you're only Mekabel Tzeis for Shabbos the Gabi Isser Melacha, not the Gabi other things. So therefore, you can still daven to Aschel if it's suffocating something like that. So it's obviously a reason better not to do it, but the reason why the ilmus mekel is because they're by and large not Mekabel Shabbos b'dibur. So therefore, they could
Would it be better to daven without a minyan?
Or the Bechol Amaratza, that's what I'm making.
Possibly. It's not so. No?
No?
What? So it's machlokes. There are those who are machmir to say that it's Mekabel Shabbos b'dibur. I don't believe anybody believes that if you didn't have any kavana that we say you can't be mekel in it. But there's a makom lahachmir for sure. You should be careful not to say good Shabbos.
What if you're in a shul that didn't have Shabbos in a row and having a very big for my room and does it mean we're not going on at the same time?
Okay.
Women have to say good Shabbos.
Unless the shul Chila has different whatever. Pashas it shouldn't be done. No. Okay. Now, look in the Alter Rebbe's brackets over here, and this is where it gets very, very, very clear, and it seems like there's no room, there's no leeway to accept Ben Tam even cooler. Ben Hashmosh is the line begins, and in the middle of the line is the brackets. It says there's no room to take into account when you take various shittas into account. You say, oh, but the Ben Tam is ich bin a elchiyat. That everyone said in a sikha, that was speaking about this way of thinking. You bring shittas from here, you can always find shittas that are make on everything. And that's the way a lot of people nowadays, unfortunately, they develop halacha. I say, what do you mean? These guys are also from and Barbarak do this way. Why they're not good? Why can't we pass this way? It doesn't work that way. There's a certain derech of psak, not just because it's our way of psak, but also once we understand things in a certain way, you can't just be megav shittas. They're related to each other. It's getting shazam. So the Alter Rebbe is saying like this. He says you can't be mekel according to what the Beinoni says that the Ben Tam, which means that an hour, full 58 and a half minutes after Shkia is still not even Ben Hashmosh yet. Yeah. Why can't you mekel according to that opinion? So he skipped the 3 lines. The lines begins Hachama. He says the first reason is this. Ki kvar chazer by habeisese b'shugonarach yedei hechzmila. He says Beinoni also didn't hold that way. This is something that people can't handle. The Alter Rebbe says, Nish nor ich halt nish lazay. The Beinoni said that you're all being semechan also nish gehalten lazay. Later in Hilchas Mila, he tells you that immediately after Shkia, you have to consider the next day. Because Mila has to be Bizman, right? And therefore you count 8 days. When you count 8 days from? Especially when it's Shabbos. When it's weekdays, also a problem. Because you have to make sure the baby was born before the Zman, after Zman. If you know which day it was. If it's day early, if you do it early, then it's a Mechus Zman. Possibly you have to do a Tavs Dam Bris. If it's a and if it's a Friday or a Sunday, you have to figure out. It could be Chil Shabbos or it could be a Mechus Zman, right? So it's a very big distinction in who you ask a shayla on this thing, because if you go to Hungarian Rav, he'll tell you that after Shkia, if it's still not the Zman of Benatam, it's considered Yoim, and you make a bris on Friday. Or the same thing, Shabbos afternoon, if it's still before the Zman, they'll say make a bris on Shabbos. You'll be matter to do something that for us we consider Chil Shabbos. So it's Ventzach Zeir Stark, who you asked. Out there it says, the Tzeis himself tells us in Hilchos Mila that immediately after Shkia. And he doesn't tell us Shkia Mita, the Shkia Rishayna, Shkia Rishniya. He just says immediately after Shkia is Rebbe Ben Moshes. So the Alter Rebbe learns Pshat in the B'Seisef that he himself later on was Chayzer in this issue. There is another reason the Alter Rebbe says, and it's another Mechudesh reason. The Alter Rebbe brings the next line. V'chein pascha shach sham, that the shach in Hilchos Mila paskins that the B'Seisef means immediately after Shkia, not later, an hour after Shkia. And that's the psak of Pri Chodesh Nerachayim. And what's the reasoning? The Alter Rebbe says, what's the reason? Why should they be Chayzer? What's the reason they're passing like the Goyim not going to time anymore? He says, this is the reason. And this is a murdike gang and psak, and it connects to a lot of different things, and even to what this guy wanted to talk about. Yeah? Is that he says the fact that many people pass in a certain way, and they all bring the same psak, doesn't make it a roiv. They're just quoting what somebody else wrote. So there's a Kshav in Gemara. There's a Gemara in Pesachim, there's a Gemara in Shabbos. And the Gemara in Pesachim and Shabbos don't work together, right? One says 4 mil, and one says 3/4 of mil. How do you resolve it? So the Ben Tam says you resolve it by saying that there's 2 shkiyas. Good. So everybody quotes, Ben Tam, Omer, Shtei shkiyas here. Ben Tam, Omer, Shtei shkiyas here. Does that mean they're passing the Ben Tam? They're resolving Gemaras. They're just quoting it. Yeah? You can't say that they are all a das haroy because they're all quoting Ben Tam. Look at that Lashon, it's very interesting. He says, Ki de Ben Tam, line begins with Taimon. It's 3/4 down the page, 2/3 down the page. Taimon. Ki de Ben Tam is Siyaitoi, because Ben Tam and his, supporters, Yechidoininhu, they're a single opinion. Ben Tam is only one opinion, even though everybody's quoting it. The Tzeis of Mechaber, the Ramah, the Magen Avram, and even all the Rishonim are quoting it. They're all a singular opinion. Neged Hagoinim Harishonim Rav Shida Rav Hai Beinoni. There was an opinion that preceded Ben Tam, the Goinim, right? And the fact that Ben Tam comes and it resolves the Gemara and he says this Shkiyas doesn't take away from what the Rishonim are saying and the Goinim are saying, and therefore everybody is quoting the Ben Tam are just Yechidah. They're just quoting a Ben Tam pasuk, a Ben Tam pasuk, a Ben Tam pasuk. Yeah, and he says therefore you have later the Ben Chananel, Shtiebel, the Div, the Ram, the Ravan. Yeah, so and their majority against the Vi, Bal Iter, and their Chaylik on the Ben Tam. So that is the second reason. So the first reason Alter Rebbe says is because B'Seis sells Chayzer. Second reason is because it's a Das Yachid. A third reason, it is a dot over here. The line is Basroi. Third reason, we can even say that there's a fourth reason because he brings Basroi, but leave that on the side. The third and fourth reason is Umagam Kidasu Hineged Hachush Uplinas Kava. And this is, in many ways, the most significant reason we're connected to what I was saying before. Is the Alter Rebbe is an expert in Zmanim. Alter Rebbe is an expert in astronomy. And he says it doesn't work to say that for an hour after it gets dark, to say it's still light outside. It doesn't fit any of the other Gemaras. The Gemara is talking about 1 star is day, 2 stars is Ben Hashmash, 3 stars is night. It's already full stars at that time. It's Zeir Shpet Banacht. It doesn't make any sense astronomically. Yeah? It says Neged Achush. It's against everything we see. Halacha has to fit. So you can't pass in that way. Uplinis gava, it's exceedingly absurd, right? And he brings a simple example in halacha to explain the absurdity. The example is like this. I mentioned that the Gemara Pesachim tells us they have 4 or 5 mil in the morning, and 4 or 5 mil in the evening, right? From Ezer Shachar till Tzeis Hakochavim, from Ezer Shachar till Neis Chama, and then you have the same thing in the evening from Shkia till Tzeis Hakochavim, right? So if you're saying, let's say it's 72 minutes. Let's say. So you look, Ezer Shachar in the morning, it's dark outside. it's the first moment that the sun astronomically goes above the horizon. You're not going to see it for a good 20, 30, 40 minutes. Even according to the Beinoni. I'll tell you much more than that. But we're not going to these inside baseball distinctions. The point is that to say that exactly the same thing that the Gemara is making a comparison that the morning for is the same thing as the evening for. So if in the morning it's so dark, right? There's full of stars in the sky by Leif Shachar. So how does that relate to the evening that it's going to be full of stars? That doesn't obviously is not Tzeis Hakochavim. It says Hakochavim. So it must be that there's a distinction that we're going to explain that the Shiur of Ben Hashmoshes in Hilchos Shabbos is different than the Shiur of walking. People walk until it gets very late, but with regards to Ben Hashmoshes and Tzeis Hakochavim, it's only the first 3/4 of a mil. So you can't compare these two Gemaras. The way of resolving the Gemara is not saying Shtei Shkiyas. The way of resolving the two Gemaras is saying is that there's a difference between walking and there's a difference between what we call Tzeis Hakochavim.
Why wasn't Al Ghazal Machmir to keep it? I mean, everyone was keeping it at this time, and all of a sudden he comes along and says...
So he's saying there's so many... So that's exactly the point. The other is saying is there's so many proofs that it's wrong.
I hear, but he's also being... Imagine the whole Klal Yisrael. Imagine today, the whole Klal Yisrael is keeping Shabbos, and a Rav comes along and says, Chevra, half hour earlier.
So that's what I wanted to say at the beginning, is that he gave a shir in Kizar Chodesh, some of the things you see some of the Poskim write, they clearly didn't have a Yad and Zman, they didn't understand the astronomy of it. And that's what I was saying, is that if you understand it, it doesn't fit. I'll explain something. There was a guy.
But I'm saying, on the other hand, it could be Mekalkal the whole Torah by people. Then all of a sudden, there's someone, everything.
No, the Alter Rebbe is not coming and reforming Chas Shalom Yiddishkeit. He's saying is this was always the shita of the Goenim. This is always the shita of the Rambam. This is the shita of the Gdei Yeshonim. No. The Pri Chadash already says it. The Megan Ashkenaz in Germany was like that. You see the Tumas Hadeshen, you see the Mariel, you see it was done, but not the main shitas in Ashkenaz, the Ramah, the Mechaber, and the Magen Avram and Shmei Pim HaChaim. It's true, but it wasn't just the Alter Rebbe. The Gra also was very forceful. The Gra and Simri Shamachalf and Shknarf also takes the whole shita of the Mechaber to task, and he very much advocates towards the shita of the Goinim. Now, it's not the only thing the Alter Rebbe was Mechadish with the Gra. There's many other things that at that time about Chodesh, many other things that things changed. Okay, we're not going to go into that now. So at the end, the Alter Rebbe finishes off and he says, "There's many other absurdities about this shita, and there's many other proofs from the Rayat Atzumis Misugas Talmud, proofs from Shas that I'm right." Yeah, even though we don't need to bring proofs, because the Divrei Goinim is Divrei Kabbalah. So basically, the Alter Rebbe is establishing this idea that this is really Pshat in Gemara, this is Pshat in fact, and really the Goinim, which Mipim HaChaim, Divrei Kabbalah, we don't really have to prove that they're right because they are right. So where does this take us? So this takes us basically that in Chabad we have the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe makes a clarity in this issue, and he tells us a few different points, but the main point is that the Shitas Zmanim have to work within the context of astronomy. It has to fit the astronomical realities. So this is one more Nakuda that I wanted to say about this. When you come to Shul and people are throwing about 72 minutes, this minute, all these things, so Zeir Shein, and it is based on Gemara, because the Gemara does talk about how many minutes, how long it takes a minute. But what the Alter Rebbe is doing, and the Gra and others that are really explaining Zmanim based on the Goinim, what they're doing is, they're saying is that it's not really about how many minutes. The Gemara used the example in Eretz Yisrael, how many minutes. Really, you're talking about astronomical phenomena of how long the sun takes to go down. Every place in the world has different times. Every time of the year has different times. So we have to relate it to the reality. It comes out, those that are using your Rebbeinu Tams without the Alter Rebbe's understanding, sometimes actually be Mekel, and it's going to be earlier. Because in places, like France, or in northern Europe, in Manchester, and even London to some extent, and the places that are further north. So essentially, they're gonna keep Ben times, possibly sometimes, that will be earlier than the sun actually goes down, because they're just worried about 72 minutes, but really it takes longer. Or the same thing with regards to Leis HaShachar. Out there tells us in Siddur, which is based on the same idea. Out there tells us in the Siddur, those that come from France and London, these places, they know that we say to Leis HaShachar from Tzeis in the summer. 1 o'clock in the morning is Leis HaShachar. Why is that? Because being that you're saying that Leis HaShachar is, let's say, 16.9 degrees, Berech, according to the Alter Rebbe. So, being that in Northern Europe, the sun never goes down so deep, it goes dark, but it doesn't get very, very dark. It goes 6, 7, 8, 9 degrees. So when it gets to the deepest part of the night, then it starts to get light. That's very exciting, even though it's many hours before Neitzachama. According to those who are just keeping a time, they say, oh, Neitzachama is 72 minutes after Leis. Or Leis is 70 minutes before Neitzachama. Which means they're going to say that Leis Shachar in the summer in France will be, let's say, at 4 o'clock in the morning. And after we say, it will be 1 o'clock in the morning. So it's a major, major distinction. Good.
Yeah.